Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a king and a queen. One day the queen gazed out her window. She wished to have a child as lovely as the newly fallen snow, with ruby red lips and hair as dark as night. That spring, a daughter was born to the queen. "Her name shall be Little Snow White," the queen announced. She brought great joy to the entire kingdom. Sadly, the queen passed away soon after her birth. The next year, the king married his new queen. She was beautiful, but did not care about anyone but herself. The selfish queen had an enchanted mirror. She would often ask her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of all?" Each time her mirror would answer, "You, O queen, are fairest of all." This answer always pleased the queen greatly. Years passed, and the king too passed away. Snow White grew as beautiful as the loveliest flower. One day the queen asked the enchanted mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of all?" To her great surprise, the mirror answered, "Snow White." The queen was really jealous when she heard this. This jealousy grew in her heart like a weed. She called for her faithful huntsman. "Take Snow White deep into the woods and kill her," the queen ordered the huntsman. The huntsman feared the queen very much, so he obeyed her. The huntsman took Snow White deep into the forest, but he found himself unable to kill Snow White. Instead, when Snow White stopped to collect some wildflowers, he quietly disappeared. When Snow White realized she was all alone, she called to the huntsman. When he did not answer, she became scared and began to cry. Snow White did not know which way to go. She climbed up a tall tree, hoping to see the castle. Snow White could not see the castle, but noticed a tiny cottage just a stone's throw away. She climbed down the tree and ran towards the cottage. She reached it just before dark and quickly went inside. It was a clean little cottage, and she soon realized there was 7 of everything set on the table. She tiptoed up the stairs and saw 7 beds, each with a warm blanket and a soft pillow. Exhausted, Snow White curled up in the nearest bed and fell asleep. Shortly after sunset, the owners of the cottage returned. There were 7 dwarfs who dug in the nearby mountains for diamonds and rubies. They ate their dinner amid much laughter and headed up to bed. They stared in astonishment at little Snow White sleeping peacefully away. They were filled with joy to have such a lovely visitor. They did not wake her, but instead took turns watching over her in case she awoke. When the sun peeked through the mountains, Snow White awoke. The 7 dwarfs welcomed her warmly. "Good morning," they said in unison. "Where have you come from?" the dwarfs inquired. They fed her breakfast and listened sadly as she told them her story. "Please stay with us," the kind dwarfs insisted. "Oh, thank you. I should like that very much," Snow White agreed. Each morning as they left, the dwarfs warned Snow White, "Don't let anyone in the house while we are away." One day the queen questioned the mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "Happily living with the 7 dwarfs. The fairest of all is still Snow White." Once again, the queen's heart was filled with jealousy. She searched the castle kitchen for a delicious-looking apple. She then went to the secret room where she kept her mirror and put 3 drops of poison on it. The evil queen cleverly disguised herself as an old peddler and headed to the home of the 7 dwarfs. The queen reached the house where the 7 dwarfs lived and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" asked Snow White. "Just a kind old peddler woman selling apples," the queen replied. Snow White opened the door. Snow White did not have any money. Still, the queen gave her an apple. As soon as Snow White bit into the apple, she fell to the ground as if dead. The queen returned to the palace, her envious heart finally at peace. When the 7 dwarfs returned that evening, they saw Snow White lying on the floor in deep sleep. They could not wake her up, and they wept with sadness. The dwarfs carved a beautiful bed for Snow White and watched over her day and night. One day, a mighty prince was riding through the forest. He saw the cottage and stopped by to get some water. There he saw beautiful Snow White in deep sleep in her bed. The dwarfs told him they could not wake her up. Thinking the fair princess was asleep, he gently shook her. As he did, the poisoned piece of apple popped out of her throat, and she opened her eyes. The prince and the 7 dwarfs were overjoyed. The prince bent down on one knee and asked, "Fair Snow White, will you marry me?" "Yes, with all of my heart," Snow White answered. Snow White and the prince had the most magnificent wedding any kingdom has ever seen. The 7 dwarfs were each given a special seat of honor. When the wicked queen heard Snow White was still alive, her jealousy was so great her heart turned to stone, and she fell down dead. Snow White was immediately crowned the new queen, and her prince the king. They ruled with kindness and wisdom, and the whole kingdom lived happily ever after.